Our next speaker is the Deputy Executive Editor at the New York Times. She's been at the paper for over 3 decades and held a wide array of positions, including Assistant Managing Editor, Foreign Editor, and Editor of the Week in Review. She was also a foreign correspondent, reporting from Tokyo, running that bureau, and an author as well. And she is the better half of one of my colleagues as a bonus. So please welcome Susan Chira.
I'm going to echo Susan and Doyle to say how delighted and proud I am that Alissa is getting the recognition that her work and her character has earned. I first met Alissa when I was in the process of seduction, trying to lure her from the LA Times to the New York Times. And the reason that I worked so hard at that is that when I was casting about for reinforcements in Baghdad, I was then foreign editor, every single one of the people who were foreign correspondents in Baghdad talked about Alissa. She was sort of the candidate by acclamation. When I asked everyone, who should I turn to, there was not a pause. And one of the things that is quite remarkable is that, as many people have already mentioned, that Alissa has, since 9/11, been laboring in the wars of our time. And if Paris has told us anything this past week, it's that it's very difficult to escape these wars. And Alissa's extraordinary experience, her perspective, her compassion, the empathy that Doyle mentioned, the historical sweep and knowledge, and the clear-eyed way that Alissa has always looked at these wars and at the ways in which the foreign powers who have tried to wage them have misunderstood the countries that they've tried to fight for and in, has really given us such a valuable way to try to wrestle with these questions that will not leave us in this time. So I had a series of lunches with Alissa when she would come in, and we fell for each other pretty fast, I'd say. And finally, we were able to work it out. And Alissa went to Baghdad, where she encountered a number of things, including the rather formidable personalities in the Times Baghdad Bureau, which Alissa, of course, won over instantly and defanged in the way that only she could, with that kind of gentle but very steely underneath, as all of us who know her. And in first Baghdad and then Kabul, Alissa wrote a remarkable series of articles about everything: the Iraq Civil War, the tragic shooting in Nisour Square, where Alissa and her colleague relentlessly pursued the unraveling of the Blackwater story that, when they gunned down civilians in Iraq, the hubris of Prime Minister Maliki, the graft that sullied the entire Afghan government, the increasing embattlement of Karzai. And typical of Alissa, when America was demonizing him, she would always argue for trying to understand what his perspective was. One of the most memorable stories that Alissa wrote from her time in Iraq, which has stayed with me for a long time and for which she won an award, was a magazine piece about a suicide bomber, which was published in August 2009, and the headline was, "How Beta Wanted to Die." Alissa went to the jail where this woman was being held, and they talked again. And Alissa recounts in this very unassuming but very detailed way how she gradually came to realize that this woman may well have been setting Alissa up to be killed. It's quite a remarkable work of reporting and storytelling. And it was also a part of Alissa's, she covered many, many things, but one of her continuing preoccupations has been how women in these war zones, what has happened to their lives, what has their perspective, what radicalized them, what victimized them, how they survived, how they did not. And I've had the privilege of working with Alissa on an incredible line of reporting about the legacy of the American enterprise in Afghanistan, in which she's done very penetrating work about how women are faring as the foreign involvement ebbs. And more of that is coming. It'll be very exciting to read. But I think the work on this really sums up a lot of Alissa's strengths and why she's so deserving of this award, because it really is a tragic tale of sort of goodwill and good intentions run aground on a culture that we didn't really understand and whose history we didn't pay sufficient respect to. And this is, to me, one of Alissa's gifts is that she's, she is a great foreign correspondent. She's fearless in war. She's incredibly careful. The fact is that she's not a reckless person. She's courageous, but she's very thoughtful about weighing the risks and the security about where she goes. But she couples that kind of field determination and knowledge and reporter's eye with an extraordinary grasp of history. Many of you who know Alissa may know that she's very interested in antique maps. And I think of that as a kind of metaphor for how she also understands the kind of morphing of the modern Middle East and how the constant sort of changing from, Ottoman times to now is still intertwined with the dilemmas that we continue to face in the 21st century. So she has an extraordinary span, the perspective, the knowledge, the history, but also another remarkable part of Alissa is that she's a deeply literary person, and it's very typical of Alissa. I wrote her because I knew she had come right from Kabul to Paris, and I wrote saying I was thinking of her, and she wrote me back a beautiful email, as Alissa is wont to do, in which she quoted Yeats. And I would say that sums up a lot about Alissa. We're so proud of you.